A consultant is going to give you advice. A vendor is going to execute on that advice. And you really need to know which one you're signing up for.
Hello and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, today's special guest is Dr. Kristopher Day. He's a board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon with a subspecialty in craniofacial surgery, and he has been practicing for the last 6 years, with the last 3 in Bellevue, Washington. Now, Dr. Day has held multiple professional leadership positions. He participates in many surgical journals. He's produced dozens of presentations and publications, and he's participated in several service and teaching endeavors in plastic surgery, both nationally as well as internationally. Dr. Day, welcome to Beauty and the Biz. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was a very generous introduction. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the big question is, how did you get from academia, I assume, and then into private practice? What was that journey like?
Yeah. Well, so I'm a first generation college graduate and first generation doctor. And I think I was just always on a path of discovery, really, that took me into what I'd seen throughout my training, which was university settings. And, that's the lineage that you just continue along. I think I then identified after I did 2 years as an assistant professor and doing mostly reconstructive work, post-trauma care, cancer care, things like that, which I think made me a good surgeon, and it really allowed me to cut my teeth. But what I discovered about myself is once I got there, I have a real self-starter, entrepreneurial personality. I like to sort of burn the midnight oil, get up early, do things that I think lend themselves to building a private practice. And so I sought opportunity to do so. And here I am now 3 years later, and I've got a growing practice.
When you left the academia world, how did you leave it? Who did you go to? Did you go straight to buying your own building, leasing a space? Did you join somebody else?
Yeah, so very much was learning as I was going, I would say. I came out into the real world, if you will, really just trying to establish an office in a community that it kind of had some side income, I guess, from a corporate income structure, but I was really building my own practice the whole time, setting up my office, getting hospital credentialing, getting insurance credentialing set up. All that stuff takes 6 to 12 months, really, on a rolling basis until you have income. I had so much reconstructive background that's really what I started with. And I think at the start, you're also not as able to convince aesthetic patients right off the bat because you have to establish yourself. You have to have something to offer them in a waiting room before they, trust you with their aesthetic care. So all of that took even longer. And, I had friends, I guess, is what I leaned on the most. The director of our surgical center, for instance, is also my landlord. So he's a mentor. I had a colleague that trained in the same state where I trained that we used to have an annual conference with, and I presented a lot of papers, as you mentioned. So we knew each other from that time. And he's actually probably the highest volume surgeon in our community. So he's somebody who I would ask his path, and now I inhabit his office after he built his own surgical center. So there's various ways, I guess, in which I kind of landed and then learned, and then am still doing so, and cultivating all of it along the way.
Where were you before Bellevue, Washington?
I was an assistant professor at the University of Iowa, which was my medical school alma mater, and also my home state is Iowa. Unfortunately, Iowans don't want a lot of plastic surgery out in the private sector anyway. They're kind of content people in general. It's not a real populated state either. So that was some of the game theory of Bellevue. Bellevue is a very vibrant aesthetic surgical market, but it's not thought of in the level of like New York, Miami, LA. But I'm from rural background, so I'd rather not be in the biggest of cities anyway. So this was kind of good balance for us.
So did you stay with, so you did a lot of recon. Are you still doing a lot of recon, or?
I do about half. I would say I would do about half reconstructive and half aesthetic. I was doing virtually all reconstructive, both in my training lineage, like a lot of us who come through plastic surgery, where, when we're in tertiary referral centers where the complex reconstruction is happening, where a lot of the workforce and the personnel are needed. So that's where these training environments are. My craniofacial fellowship was heavily reconstruction oriented. I, published papers in trauma reconstruction, like a textbook out of Johns Hopkins and all this stuff. I was very much recon oriented. It's aesthetic refinement that I kind of pick up along the way as you try to optimize each of your patient's outcome and really kind of strive for that next level of appearance. And then you just accumulate more and more of those cases, but you're always drawing from that other background that you have. So I started out, even in my private practice, the majority was recon. We've kind of turned the corner at year two, really, is where it started, but continuing in year three here, to be more and more aesthetic oriented, and we'll continue to refine that. So I'd say, yeah, we're still about half and half, but we're accelerating on the aesthetics.
How challenging is it to do both? I've just seen I'm a
Yeah,
consultant. The doctors say, "Tell me how to scale," and I say, "I'm sorry, but you can't. It's really difficult to do both. You don't have focus. You just don't have focus." And yeah, that
yeah. I would say you're right, and I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. I've read your book. I will confirm that the stuff you put out has proven true time and time again. So I won't tell you you're wrong. I will say that it is a natural evolution I have seen over and over and over again. And certainly here in Bellevue, the majority of the longstanding practices are aesthetic practices. There are very, very few to no freestanding solo reconstructive practices, because I think some of the overhead, some of the workforce through insurance approval processes and everything else, just is quite burdensome, and it really requires almost institutional dynamics, employed dynamics. So private practice certainly gives you stimulus. It certainly cultivates that transition. Also, patients want that experience. We have drive up parking, and we see people readily on their schedule often. We kind of meet them where they are more so. We have more agility. We're more nimble than institutions really can be. I have some memories of, like, oh goodness, trying to get Botox for the first time in my tertiary referral clinic in academia. The patient was almost in tears by the time pharmacy, after they dispensed all the pressor medications and everything else and got around to the Botox, like they would never come back again. You know what I mean? So, yeah, so we can do some things to deliver that customer service I don't think other places can. And that's what our aesthetics have grown out of. I mean, many of my aesthetic patients were the mother of the child's face I showed up, or the patient who had a paniculectomy who then said, "Hey, can you do something else for me?" Or just somebody whose other care I've provided in the reconstructive setting. So, I think a lot of practices evolve that direction, and we're just on that path right now.
My concern is all about the cosmetic patient because I'm a cosmetic revenue specialist,
Yeah.
and something you want to do when a patient has a credit card, she definitely has a different attitude
Oh,
about the.
you're 100% right. So I just walked out of our last patient of the day, was a pre-op for implant exchange. So I've seen this in implant exchange. I've seen this in the threshold between a paniculectomy and a abdominoplasty. I've seen this in expectations for breast reduction, but then they come back later and maybe also want implants. So there's this crossover that just sometimes makes sense, sometimes doesn't make sense. And I'm sure you're going to ask some other questions about, like, challenges in staffing. I think for us, it kind of boils down to that, because, insurance processing takes a lot of time from our staff. Also, they want a different type of service and have different type of expectation. So if a patient does have an insurance card, then they expect for the majority, at least, of their services to be paid for already, because they've already paid their premiums. If they have the need or want for a cosmetic surgery or something aesthetic, then they know that coming in. They've already sort of maybe pre-vetted you, because they've done their homework and know that they're going to be making a significant financial investment, so they're primed for that mindset. So that is the challenge, because to switch back and forth between those two, um, is difficult sometimes. But like I said, we feel like we're like in a 200-meter race, and we've rounded the corner and we're on the straightaway now. So I just have this wealth of like experience and I guess confidence built from these other hundreds of cases, whether they're reconstructive or aesthetic, but have had now some of the packaging, if you will, to put it in the context of the expectations of the aesthetic patient. And I think the more you do that every day, the better you get at doing that every day. But it definitely takes a transition, or being just cognizant of who you're talking to and what their expectations are.
Hello there. Quick pause to ask you if you have gaps in your practice draining your time, profits, and peace of mind. If so, I can help you streamline, grow, and take the guesswork out of your practice. Book your practice growth strategy review at catherinemaley.com, and let's turn those gaps into growth. Now, back to the podcast. Well, you have to make sure your staff is on board as well,
Yeah.
because aesthetic patients are looking for customer service.
Yeah.
And your staff is medical staff treating like hospital people. It just it hurts your brand. It hurts everything. Like the patient's confused, especially if they think you're going to take insurance, and then you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we've been on the phone for over an hour trying to get you approved, and it's not happening." And then
Yeah.
you get all caught up in that. And I'm saying, thank God you surgeons want to do recon. It's just I'm just saying, if you do recon, there's an opportunity cost that you're going to lose there trying to also do cosmetic at the same time. It's just
Yeah.
not an easy balance. And but if you can do it, go for it. And if it makes you happy, what I would say is don't take all of them. Just take your favorite insurance cases. You know,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's probably good advice. One of the interesting things about Seattle is there is a very large population of LGBTQ patients, and for whatever reason, they've kind of found me. It was the last thing I actually did in academics. It was due to another surgeon's retirement. I was just sort of assigned to do this transformational surgeries for gender affirmation. So when I got into practice, and it just so happened there was a big backlog here in Seattle, those patients also found me here through treating a couple and then having them tell their friends. So that's a real interesting crossover, and it's a moving target. So what's aesthetic today or reconstructive today might not be what's aesthetic or reconstructive tomorrow, or maybe of the whole patient, parts of it are and parts of it are not. So, for example, for top surgery, we get almost 100% approval. For facial feminization or masculinization, we probably get just over half approval. But one of the things that then gives me an advantage, though, because I do have this background, so not everybody can do some of the facial bony modifications, but I did this craniomaxillofacial training, and I have this kind of still straddling both the reconstructive and the aesthetic world, so I can service those patients in a comprehensive way that most people can't. So you do also, I will say everything you're saying is true, but you never know what's going to come along tomorrow to be a unique scenario that you didn't even realize that you were preparing for leading up to that. And so that's what I've kind of discovered at the same time. I think just try to do everything that you're going to try to do as best as you can, and then just keep refining every day, and eventually you're going to end up in a better place. It may or may not be what you envisioned it to be at the start, but I think we've seen that progress happen.
just stay adaptable. You know,
Yeah.
you'll will change. Your taste will change. Your patient's taste will change. You'll evolve as you move into this industry more and more. You'll find your way. But reimbursement in California is amazing for that world. It's shocking. I can't get an implant because apparently teeth are optional. But boy, if you need any kind of transitional surgery, wow,
Yeah.
there is some
Yeah.
great reimbursement here in California for it. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So who's on board on your team? Is it a small boutique-ish kind of thing, or
It is very much a small boutique-ish kind of thing. I still try to make, a lot of the, post-operative calls myself, and I'm doing my own consults. We're not in a business model where we're pre-assigning to a PCC and then there's the booking of surgery and then you meet the surgeon, not at all. It's me on the front end. I try to put out a lot of our content, um, personally, including educational stuff, so people can also get a sense of me along with the information. Um, and then I have a coordinator. She is a lovely young girl who has, I'd say, 98% of her medical experience in my practice. She's become a medical assistant and a certified registered surgical tech, and she even has a contact with one of the local universities as a point of contact for mentorship for people interested in doing similar stuff to her. But she's really learned everything with us, and that's it. It's a two person team. We have a lot of outside then associates for various other services. So our insurance processing, our marketing, our accounting, all of these are relationships that I have outsourced from my office so that they don't have to be under my own personal payroll. And we get probably higher level of service because those are then companies that only do that or individuals that only do that for each of those things. And then we sort of partner with a surgical center.
Yeah, if that's not your bailiwick or whatever that word is, I
Mhm.
love outsourcing. The secret is how do you manage to manage them to make sure you're getting the service you think you are, and there's got to be a whole bunch of transparency. You know, do you find that a challenge at all? Trying to keep an eye on all the vendors to make
Oh,
sure.
absolutely. So our internal mantra is basically Sophia's the hub for everything. I'm where the buck stops, and obviously I'm the clinical provider. And then our vendors are sort of the various avenues that it can go from the hub, but they have to be overseen. We have to trust but verify all the time. And sometimes we get a deal that we expected, and sometimes we don't. What I have learned is almost never do long-term contracts. I've done it 3 times. Every time I've regretted it, and so we have kind of a policy we don't do them anymore. And have as many conversations on the front end as you can, but that also then, practically speaking and realistically, has to be balanced with time management because you can't just sit around and have hours and hours of conversations and then have no social media content produced or Google ads managed or whatever it is that you're going to engage whatever individual you're talking about with. One of our longest standing relationships, because I had no business training background, I was in a and that was really my deficit, my greatest deficit probably coming out. Like I don't think it's too unique. It is a decade of this sort of ivory tower perspective where I'd not always followed up on any pre-approvals or various other dynamics that really are required to make a practice go or sit in the sales element of the consult after you talk about all the clinical stuff, right? I mean, and what I've learned is, people really want your confidence in all aspects of your practice. And if you can't deliver that to them, then they might not give you their confidence to allow them to be your patient, right? So, and I think you just learn that through experience and cutting your teeth. And I've kind of, looked at that head on. But what I was going to say is like our accountant, for example, is our longest standing vendor relationship just because that's been a good one. Other things have been a little more turnover, like billing. We had a biller who his business went out of business. So we had to find another one. And then, sometimes they charge you through various fees, like a lot more than they said they were going to. So, it's ongoing, I guess, is the point. You have to have somebody, if not you personally, you have to have somebody checking on vendors and then making sure that they don't negatively impact your patient experience and always take responsibility, even if it is an outsourced thing. Say, oh, I'll take care of that for you, or I'll look into that for you with them, not, hey, you can call them, but I'm going to do that for you. So, those are just the mentalities I think that we try to carry into it.
I just recommend at least talking to them once a month and let them explain to you what they've done for you that month or the past month and what
Absolutely.
results, and let me see some numbers and some charts and things. Like you really want to have them explain what it is they're doing for you every month. Just the sheer connecting with them and knowing that you're going to connect with them helps a lot. It just keeps
Right.
everyone on their toes, you know?
And I know that this wasn't actually, you weren't actually asking me for an example. Let me give you one to just illustrate what you exactly said. So I started out in a small business development center. So this is like a free public service that anybody can get in any state if you have no kind of business training. So I would just attend these webinars that were usually half hour to an hour, no different than you would attend the American Society of Maxillofacial Surgery webinar, online when they have educational content or something like that, right? Through them, I was connected with a marketer who I learned later was really not actively doing anything. And that's where I kind of learned the difference between a consultant and a vendor in a very real way. So a consultant is going to give you advice. A vendor is going to execute on that advice. And you really need to know which one you're signing up for. Like you said, transparency and upfront communication, right? And both could be good and both could be what you need. But if you think you have one and you have the other, then you're going to be disappointed either way. So that's, yeah. I mean, again, just learn through doing has been so many of the story. It was also how I got into medicine, starting from an EMT and a phlebotomist, and then a army medic before medical school. I mean, I learned very much through doing, and it becomes very real once you've had those initial experiences that then impact your budget or your time, or something doesn't go as planned that you got to drop everything and pick up the pieces to figure out. But at the same time, once you've done all those things, what you have is yours and you've created it, and you get to have that self-satisfaction of being the engine behind something. So that's fun.
So your profit centers are you have recon, then you have cosmetic. Are you doing any non-surgical?
I would actually put well, I mean, cosmetic accounts for the vast majority of our revenue. Cosmetic surgery accounts for the vast majority of our revenue. It's about 50-50 for volume, but yeah, recon as well for surgery. And then I do the full spectrum of the, I would say, bread and butter, um, non-capital expenditure, non-surgical stuff. So I've intentionally, I do Botox, filler, microneedling, PRP. We have a spectrum of skincare topicals. um, I have a relationship again within our building. We basically have lasers that I can get access to, but I have not chosen to purchase any capital investment stuff of that, six-figure level. Um, and yeah, that about summarizes it.
Are you also doing weight loss? I thought I noticed something on your website.
Yeah, I would say of our patient populations, it's I guess you call it bread and butter face, breast, and body aesthetic surgery, LGBTQ transformational surgeries in both top surgery and facial transformations, post-bariatric weight loss patients, and then probably like the mom makeover aesthetic subgroup is our other kind of niches.
That's fantastic. What would you say has been your biggest challenge running your own practice?
Uh, my own development of some degree of business sense, savviness, strategic planning, also managerial skills, all that stuff that people in business school learn. And there's, big institutions that have all these curriculums for, never really had that. I was, neuroscience and philosophy in college. I was, straight through medical school, very much, involved in like medical mission work and free clinics and surgery, and did some extra like time in medical school and a pathology fellowship, and basically everything I can do to sort of get more understanding of what it was to apply surgery. But then all of a sudden you have to decide, are you going to recruit through word of mouth, indeed.com, ZipRecruiter? Like, okay, that's a real decision. I have no idea. What are you going to pay? How do you find out what the rates of pay should be? How do you find out what the rates of charge your aesthetic patients are? All of these sort of business decisions, or setting up QuickBooks for the first time, or applying for your, NPI numbers. Right now, we're setting up our office-based surgical facilities. So because one of our biggest overheads is hourly rates in the operating room, but we have surgeries that we can readily do in our office that we now have capacities to do with surgical assistant relationships and things like that. So we're setting that up. So that's my next layer of learning that I'll be doing here very soon. But that requires potentially separate business entities. So that's really been my learning curve, is knowing absolutely nothing about any of that, and then learning one step at a time how to navigate each one of those.
Why would you know that? Your whole focus was to become a surgeon. The rest of us were in business school and learning the marketing and the business, and then
Yeah,
you were surgeons, and that's exactly how I got into this industry because I thought I can shortcut this for everybody because you're going to have to learn this from the ground up. And frankly, I did my MBA at night because I didn't have a silver spoon or whatever, so I was working full time and getting my MBA at night, and it took 3.5 years, and I'm very proud of that. But I thought in today's world I could have totally done that online, like, going to the right webinars and buying the right courses. It didn't need to be 3.5 years. I could have, I just think a lot of this can be condensed and a lot was foofy, but boy, it's so good to know it now. And that's what I do. I try to help you guys, shortcut this. And because you'll waste so much time and money trying to test and figure it out and try something else. And you're also not in that frame of mind. You think like a surgeon versus a
yeah,
businessman or a cosmetic patient. And it's tough to think about like a cosmetic patient, a female cosmetic patient. Oh dear.
yeah.
No, that's a complex patient. Ah,
You're certainly making a leap, and it's always interesting talking to business people because they do have this different like vision on the system, I guess. That I feel like I'm walking through a room with a flashlight and they just flip on the light switch, and they're like, "Why didn't you turn on the light switch?" I'm like, "There's a light switch." So
that's a great
it's
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, but it is a potent way to learn because if you make one of those mistakes, you will maybe be trying to figure that. Like, so I started first thing I did LegalZoom.com. I'm gonna just put in my business name, right? And then it's like, do you use your own name? Do you use a practice name? Well, I still struggle with that. And there's arguments for both ways. And so you talk to 3 or 4 friends, and then you decide, okay, of the guys I talk to or girls I talk to, like, well, they all said this, so I'll do that. Or sometimes it's, hey, some said this, some said that. This one makes more sense, so I'll go with that. But for instance, it asked me on their interface, you just have to have a program interface, right? That says, do you want your business name to be called such and such comma, Inc. or Corp. And I figured, well, I hear Inc. more often. But long story short is there was no PLLC, which all of my friends had told to use, but that wasn't a choice. So I thought it was just the name. Basically, what I selected was not a PLLC S Corp. I selected a corporation, which would have like monthly corporate
Director.
taxes and assume that I had some sort of jet that I was flying around the world or something. I don't know. That took me 3 months to figure out because I had to then work with a state office to change that, and it was just literally just clicking the wrong box. So experiences like that you could definitely avoid if you had those insights in advance. We can't all be all things though, right? So that's the conundrum. Like, what things are you going to learn yourself, teach yourself, actively go out and look up, and or what things are going to come naturally and you're going to be guided through, because people don't expect you, like in my credentialing process, they don't expect a surgeon to know every little nuance of every little insurance process. So there's people to guide you through that because they expect that. Not necessarily maybe in the marketing sphere as much, because it really is like kind of a who has the energy, ingenuity, and maybe like experience to navigate it better is who succeeds. And a lot of things I wanted to share at some point in our conversation, you might not uh, do again if you knew what it all entailed, but that in and of itself doesn't make it something that you shouldn't have done to learn that process to get there. I mean, you have to get there somehow. So again, just you got to embrace the process and the journey, I guess, if you're going to be on your own, because you're going to have to evolve and continue to evolve and be nimble and service different patient populations as they find you. And so having that openness and adaptability, I think, is the important part.
And knowing enough to know what people are saying to you is real or not real is really
Hmm.
helpful, because if these vendors know that you know nothing about people
Yeah.
ads, or you
Yeah.
know nothing about marketing strategies, that's who's going to get you,
Yeah.
and you have to just hope and pray or whatever. And you don't want to do that. You want to know some things. It's also really helpful to have a friend who's like a year or two ahead of you, who's already made some of the big mistakes, or a mentor from who's even a decade ahead of you. You're in a good situation though, aren't you? In a building with it sounds like you're with your professor or your mentor, or, I mean, do you have really good networking possibilities within your area there?
Yeah, so I remember the conversation in college when I told my brother just how hard I was working, and he got like straight A's in college, and I was doing well, but I thought I could be doing better. And he goes, "Well, who's your mentor?" And I was like, "What? What's a mentor?" And then I realized, oh, that's a mistake, to not be bouncing things off of more experienced people that have trudged the path that you've gone and that you're trying to go on is a mistake. So since then, I've tried to embrace, just asking people, even if it's peers or colleagues or people that are just a few years along further than me. And I've done that at various stages. I have friends that I have continued. I have a text message string of about a half dozen guys that I stay in touch with, and because we've all had similar trials, and so we'll say, like, hey guys, like, do you find that these patients with ruptured breast implants aren't always so interested in committing to their revision surgeries? And then, they want it covered by insurance. Do you guys ever get this covered? Oh, that's just a text message I find out in a second, right? Whereas otherwise it might be a bit of a trial where I find that out over the course of a couple weeks. So I do that. And then in our building, I'm located in an accredited surgical facility. In fact, one of only two freestanding accredited state licensed surgical facilities on the east side of Seattle. So Bellevue's a very vibrant, aesthetic surgical community. But really, if you don't have your own facility, which I do not, because I bootstrap my practice and didn't have a lot of my own personal money, nor wanted to take out a lot of bank money, I just co-collaborate. But the individual that owns it is a very, good, energetic, very experienced, 30-plus year clinician. And then someone that I knew from our training time, because I'd met him at conferences while I was a resident and fellow, was here. And I've kind of tried to at least walk in his footsteps. So he's kind of like big brother. Then I got dad, who's my landlord, and then his wife managed his practice, who is an oculoplastic surgeon also. So she's whip smart, and she's really been my main, other than my wife, has been my main consultant that I reach out to if I'm really in a conundrum and I'm just like, Eva, what do I do? And she'll just say, oh, well, obviously you do this, and she just shoots me really straight. And those people have made all the difference. Really, it's a community of people is the point. I think you make connections, you reach out, you weigh people's various advice and see what resonates with you and what works. And then if it works and it helps you to talk to these people, keep talking to these people is what you should do.
For sure. Is your wife working in the practice now?
So my wife's an MHA, healthcare manager. She's worked in various sectors of healthcare, kind of an award-winning manager and all these great things that I've lucked into knowing since high school. And she's too smart for me and said, uh, we have three kids and somebody's got to be there when they get off the bus. So I have a job. Basically, we've balanced the long hours of surgical training with her working. She works from home even before COVID and everybody working from home. That's what we did. So yeah, no, she very much enjoys her own career and was too smart to let me co-opt her into my personal endeavors. So yeah, she does help me, and she's a great advisor really, because she has the insights, but she also cares about me and cares about my success, and that's what you want. You want someone with like some knowledge and experience, but also like genuinely cares about you, and your success. Yeah.
Well, that's usually how the wife ends up in the practice. There, somebody was there who embezzled or just wasn't
Yeah.
trustworthy, and that's how the wife ends up in the practice. So hopefully that doesn't happen to you.
Yeah, so Sophia is a great values person that is never going to embezzle for me. I'm pretty sure, and unless hopefully one day you don't have to say I told you so or anything like that. But I will say that workforce challenges in general, and I don't just speak to my area, although I think my area it's real amongst myself and my colleagues of what we're finding of candidates, but also nationwide. Like I have one friend who says that he's had almost half a dozen turnover in 3 months, which is not a good thing. I don't even get a show for, I would say 20 to 30% of interviews that are set, let alone arrive at all. So that's really a limiting factor. So it's not going to be embezzlement. It's just going to be not being able to find enough good employees that can meet, like to your points, the high expectation needs of the aesthetic patient. Somebody who's going to pay 10, 15, or even $20,000, they're are not interested in no one answering the phone. They are not interested on someone getting back to them, but then being unsure of the information that's being conveyed or giving conflicting information from what the surgeon said, right? So they got to be really high functioning individuals, and they got to be people you don't even have to worry about whether they're going to show up on time or want to work hard, but are going to apply themselves to do things. So your book is a required reading in our practice. I'm not just saying that to suck up in this conversation. Like it is, because really there aren't that many books out there, and you have to have something to like collect people onto a central mindscape to be on, so that you can be servicing the patients. So I think that is where it'll go way before embezzlement. Is I just won't be able to find like good enough people to be in these roles, but we're doing pretty well so far. So
So what's your plan to grow, or do you want to stay this? What do you have a plan?
yeah, I guess I have aspirations. Um, so I'm in a lease for 3 years. I may or may not, like the goal really is before the extension of that to have our office-based surgical facilities mapped out with it's called Level B Office Quad A certification. And if I can do that, then I can leverage a lot. I can basically decrease our expenses greater than probably any other endeavor that I do.
What kind of anesthesia does that allow you to use in
Yeah,
office?
so I've already had them review like our floor plan, and with certain materials put in place, I could go to higher levels. Level A is, your general anesthesia. I'm not going to do that really for liability and risk reasons. I'm going to stay within myself and basically have an IV in the arm, but not use it. Is the philosophy we want to have during procedures, and just use oral medications and local anesthetic. That's our level B is what our goal is. You can use moderate sedation in level B, but we're not going to even do anything that's going to affect level of consciousness, essentially, so that we stay in a really safe space. But then that will allow some things like blepharoplasty in a willing patient, or we do some Mohs reconstruction. We sometimes we'll have a pediatric patient, because craniofacial includes pediatric plastic surgery that just has a small lesion. So some things like that. It opens up certain possibilities, in addition to the more aesthetic procedures like awake liposuction and things of that nature. So that's going to help a lot with decreasing our expenses if we're able to develop that. We are on a growth path. I'm booking out, I guess, 2, 3 months now in terms of surgery. But if you asked me this time last year, that might have been, depending on the month, it might have been 2, 3 weeks, or it might have been 6 weeks. So I think we're on the path where kind of our volumes, and once we compress that a little bit, basically we're going to have increased revenues. So with decreased expenses, increased revenues, we have more capital. When we have more capital, we're going to be doing things like hiring additional employees. I'd like to think an RN injector is on the horizon, although we're approached by one every month and have not yet found one that brings more to the table than we would have to bring to their table, so to speak. But if we can figure out that equation, I'd like to have basically a spectrum of additional team members. And then the next steps on the future horizon, like 5, 10 years, would be my own surgical facility. And after that would be before, too long, building purchase. But that's really long-term horizon. In the meantime, I got 3 kids to get through school and get to college probably before I'm owning my own building. So we'll see how that all balances out.
I would recommend regarding the nurse injector, take your time.
Yeah.
And if there's any way you can find one that has been in the community for a very long time. I
Uh-huh.
like one who has had her own business. She
Yeah.
realizes how difficult it is to run your own practice
Yeah.
and kind of over it. She wants a
Yeah.
safe haven to close up shop, go hang out with you,
Mm,
get paid well, and bring a whole bunch of people with her. I just think that's the right group because if you get some hotshot who's, 25 and thinks she's all that and she's
yeah.
got social media going, but she's entitled and expects you to take care of her and find the patients, I want someone with skin in the game. Like they bring value to you, not you bring value to them.
Yeah, I love that advice. We are literally approached once a month, because we are in this community that's recognized of the whole state as the aesthetic market, and we're in the heart of it. We're in what's called the medical corridor. So we will get that call, and then the next questions will be, okay, do you have any patients? Do you have a business plan? It's just no, no, no. Yes, I would like a salary or some hourly base and commission, and can you train me, and then I'm just wondering, like, I can do my own injections. I don't think you understand, like, I don't necessarily need this person except for when I'm out of the office doing surgery. Then they could be in the office doing the things that I can't be in 2 places at one time to do. So I hear what you're saying. That equation is tough though, because I don't know about you, but if somebody is like that, like we have someone in our building, who, over $100,000 Instagram followers, has dozens of clients, is already set up. She actually inhabits my old office after I moved into the nicer office, but she doesn't necessarily want to be like managed over. She wants her own thing, right? And so, yeah, I haven't found that sweet spot between the two, where the one that has something to offer also wants to join uh, someone and be sort of directed, have a medical director like that. So if we do, great. We'll see. But yeah, I'm gonna let it come now. I'm not out there, and we're not at all desperate. So I'm gonna let it come.
Let's talk about marketing because that's my favorite topic. How competitive is it there for you?
So it's super competitive for like things that I would say, without getting too controversial in how I say things, like a non-plastic surgeon can do. So if you have a corporate medical facility, they are probably spending millions on marketing, and your cost per conversion on Google Ads is going to be astronomical. So we are kind of priced out of the market by some like national companies in like liposuction, for example. And that's not entirely bad to me because I like to do big surgery. You can't liposuction post-bariatric patients. They've already done the work for you in that respect. You're doing large skin excisions where that's not being done at those facilities. Um, so that's one challenge, but you just have to sort of position yourself in regards to that. There's 30 people within a 3 mile radius that do some version of what I do. And plastic surgery is a very broad field. There, American Society of Plastic Surgery has a white page just to describe what our scope is, because it's one of the more amorphous fields in medicine, right? We're like a principle based surgery, not an anatomy or a region of the body or a certain organ system like others. So I overlap with ENTs, I overlap with cosmetic surgeons, I overlap with dermatologists, I overlap with um, a bunch of different providers, oculoplastics, and I, have had good results in certain elements of all of those fields that I just mentioned. And then doing craniomaxillofacial, you even have more overlap in the face, right? So I think it's about just sort of, you only have so many eggs to put in the basket. And so you can't, like, I'm going through right after we talk here, actually, my friend and marketing helper is, he just emailed me like 583 keywords that have hit on Google in the last how knows however many months, right? So I'm going and like kind of identifying the good ones and the bad ones, and then I give that back to them, right? And then he uses that to refine our ads so that I'm not just sort of throwing money out the window. I do have friends, and I think probably if we're being real, like more that say it than actually do it. But I mean, I have many friends who say they don't spend anything, um, and then they do really well. I think sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not the whole story, because I've also seen them on various platforms that I know are paid platforms, so that doesn't totally add up. But then, there's so many different directions you can go. You can go social media, you can go pay per click, you can go evergreen stuff, you can put up billboards, you can do magazines. I think, like you're very upfront about saying, which is good to hear, have those meetings, ask those questions. My dad was a great businessman, and the advice he gave me was, tell them your expectations and your timeline by which they should arrive at them. And then if they don't, then either, move on or provide, a reminder, so to speak, that this is what you expect and a deadline by which you expect it, or then move on. Because if you're not getting a return, like what's the point of marketing? There's no point in it otherwise. It's all sort of a fantasy land unless it's actually giving some return.
What's working best for you?
Google Ads, I would say. I'm starting to explore a little bit social media ads too on Instagram and TikTok. Um, I haven't done magazines or billboards because I just personally I throw magazines in the trash when I get those. And I don't know. I feel billboards for me personally are would just they're not my personality, so I'm not going to do it. Yeah, so it's pretty much Google Ads.
Any tips on how you get patients to refer their friends or give you a good review?
That is just old school. Give them good feelings, Maya Angelou, they remember how you made them feel. And I think once you can, break through with somebody, then I mean, the old saying is true. They really are going to be your advocate. Like I had this one town, it's called Auburn. It's like 2 hours away from where my office is. And I just started getting all these people from Auburn. And I'm like, why are people coming here from Auburn? And it's because one of the first patients I treated in my practice, like one of the first three patients I had, like works in a sports bar in Auburn, and she just kept sending people to see me. And then, I had a run of like mom and daughter, like, daughter would get a breast augmentation, mom would get a breast lift. I had that like three times within a 2 month period or something. Um, and like I said, I do have associates who probably generally don't spend a whole lot, and they're just more established. They've been here, they've serviced a good number of patients, they've done a good job. Some of those patients are either now getting a second surgery, or they have brothers, sisters, cousins, friends, So I do think that is the greatest value. The word of mouth really is the greatest value because it's free. The paid stuff is really like giving you the opportunity to enter whatever their network is and convince that initial person. But after that, yeah, you really want to give them great service so that they feel good, and then they tell somebody how you made them feel.
So, well, let's move on. Give me a crazy patient or staff story you care to share.
Oh, I could give you this is PTSD moments, but I could give you one for each. So I did have one employee that, this just goes to illustrate the age old, like, hey, do you hire someone with a bunch of experience, or do you hire someone that is green and then teach them your ways? And do you hire someone maybe from experience outside your industry, like Nordstrom's or something, right? So one of my biggest competitors uh, is, downtown, longstanding, I think six surgeon group. They had a person that had been with them for a while. And then I don't know, the story goes a couple other positions, but essentially came to me as like, I have all this experience and I can deliver you some of those processes. And unfortunately, I mean, maybe at one walk of life that was true and at one stage, but then, just had a lot of personal balance, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, issues. Missed 3 days a month of work, usually unannounced with a text message at 6 a.m. as my lone employee, and sometimes caused me to, juggle my entire clinic, up to, 20 patients in a day by myself. Um, and then ended up after various conversations with me saying, "Hey, this isn't sustainable. We got to do something different here." Said, "Okay, yeah, I'll be better." And then asked for a Wednesday off for a child's birthday after Memorial Day, and then left early on Friday and texted at 6 a.m. on Tuesday, "Hey, I got some food poisoning from oysters over Memorial Day weekend. I won't be in." So essentially took a 5-day weekend. And that was my last straw. And I just said, "Hey, you either need to go to part time, or this is going to constitute like not meeting our action plan, basically, right?" Um, and then proceeded to quit, and then applied for unemployment and got it for 4 months before I knew about it. And then I was just emailed from the state to say, "Hey, could we get their contract?" And I'm like, "Why?" And of course, when anyone from a state department communicates, they then say, "Oh, I don't know. It's just this is my area. I don't know. Somebody's asking for it." So spent hours to kind of look into it. They've gotten $11,000 after they quit. And so then I had to go through a whole process. I had to speak with a state attorney, and basically sided in my favor. And unfortunately, she had all that taken back. But it just blew my mind that someone could be that kind of delinquent in their responsibilities, and then elect on their own accord to move on, and then still expect to get to the tune of five figures uh, for nothing. So yeah, that was a real eye-opening experience on just how one, you have to find the right people, um, but like, I think it's human nature. We're all going to try to strive to get whatever we can, and you have different perspectives on things, and you need alignment of that at all times. Communication over and over again.
Oh, and you need some character too. I mean, I personally couldn't do that. I wouldn't sleep at night. I feel so guilty. I'm Irish Catholic. I'm just, I've grown up with guilt, and it's not in my character. I just can't imagine doing that. But that's me.
Yeah, I mean, I think too in medicine, especially the long track there is to physicianhood or surgeonhood, like we've gone through a lot of these stages, and I think that's what a lot of people don't necessarily realize. Like as interns, we were not super important people. Like we were that bottom of the totem pole, right? Where a lot of those menial tasks and things fell to. So now you raise through the levels, and you eventually want someone who can help you do those things and share the load. And but at the end of the day, in private practice also, it's kind of a partnership that's never going to be more than just that. Is a partnership. Like you're sharing the load, you're not just giving up it entirely, because you can't. You have to keep some involvement. You also have to be capable of doing those things. So if that person walks away and you don't have another person who's interchangeable, like that's going to be you who needs to do those things. And you're not going to know like your whole big perspective business strategy and best approaches to things unless you have like feelers, boots on the ground, experience. But my patient one was just a DVT on a mommy makeover who'd gotten a Caprini score evaluation and was, I think, appropriately not anticoagulated and encouraged to ambulate and all these other things to prevent. But yeah, unfortunately, got a blood clot in her leg. Ended up getting treated promptly and very well, and recovered completely. Had a great outcome aesthetically, but her hospital bill was not paid for, And we have since gotten cosmeticure insurance, elective insurance, but did not have it at that time for all patients, and just completely took it out on our practice, even though this was a disclosed risk of the procedure that we responded to immediately, and we're very concerned about, and did great. She did great, at the end of the day. But it costs money to get leg ultrasounds and to go get anticoagulation and things like that. And her insurance elected not to support her in that, which I've heard different things from different people on whether that usually happens or doesn't happen. So that's my tough patient experience, because she was very aggressive on some reviews. And I'm proud to say that, the vast majority of my reviews are very good, but she used intentionally inflammatory language and then tried to get 5,000, basically extorted us for $5,000, which we never ended up giving to her. But then she wouldn't take down the reviews, and here we are. And you just had to outlive those things, I think. So that's my patient story.
Sorry to hear that. Um, you know what? It's just part of doing business with the public. The more I look at this, if you don't have your own brand and your own image and vision of who you are, and you're trying to cater to the public, and the public is all over the place, I
Mm-hmm.
just think you will go insane trying to dance for the public. I have
Mm,
more and more, nope, we're going to stop right now. What are our values? What are we trying to do here? Where are we going?
yeah,
What kind of patient do we want to work with? And have boundaries. I would have boundaries nowadays. I
yeah,
would have rules. I would have people getting through gates. And if they can't get through the gate, then it's a
right.
no, because otherwise it's a crapshoot, you know? How many times have you thought this is the greatest patient and they turn out to be a nightmare, or the other way around? You're thinking, "Oh, I don't know about this." And then she turns out to be a raving fan. So you just can't keep up with that. I would say get to know you, decide who
Yeah.
you are, and then you decide who gets in, and who shouldn't. But some of this stuff, it's just complicated when you're dealing with humans, you know?
Yeah, it's great advice. I'm probably going to be working on the application of what you just said for the next 20 years, probably. But yeah, no, I think you're right though, because your brand sort of dictates what light is lit behind your sign, and therefore who's going to notice that sign, if you will. I'm speaking very abstractly, but it's going to determine who ends up matriculating through your office, right? Like when I started out, I was very naive, and I'd like to think I'd learned some lessons. But I also started from a position of idealism. I want to take care of anybody who had need at the same time and have no barriers to care. So I yeah, it included, I remember one individual who had been the victim at a prison while he was incarcerated of facial trauma, right? Like, it was like a prison fight, broke multiple bones in his face. I took care of him. He was actually very grateful. He was a good patient, really. And his time in the hospital was really like time out of jail. So he was happy to be there. The problem was he brought two armed guards to every appointment who sat next to my breast lift patient, you know? How do I explain that? I mean, that makes them pretty uncomfortable, right? So here I am trying to do a good deed. I don't think I was ever paid for that, actually. Fixed multiple broken bones in his face, his broken nose, and he probably just ran off. At the end of the day, just ran off some aesthetic patients that would have paid thousands of dollars. So very bad business sense, right? Again, and you take your licks out here in the real world, and then you learn from them. And you talked once, Catherine, about making your car your university, when you're listening to various audiobooks and things. I've done that with like your materials, and also on my treadmill, like I listen to audiobooks. Um, and every now and then there'll be an epiphany moment where it's like, oh duh, this. But it's an ongoing. I think of it as a flywheel. It's a turning thing. It's not linear, and it's certainly not like you're either there or you're not at the start. Like you're just having iterations, and you're getting more and more knowledge and experience as one iteration works and one iteration doesn't, and then you do it more the way it works the next time. And then hopefully a few days later or months later, or I don't have the perspective of many years yet, but a couple of years later, you know which road to go down that is right before you go down it. So that's, I'm thankful for this process, right? Like, hey, it could be worse. You could be kind of in a mindless situation that doesn't have this much intellectual stimulation. So I enjoy that. I like chess matches. I like challenges. So I'm excited for the future.
You have autonomy now, so you do it your way, and there are pros and cons to that. I would just stay curious, I would stay open, and you need to be naive when you start things like this. If you knew
Yeah,
how hard it was, you wouldn't do it.
exactly.
It's really fun to be challenged every day. Some days it's like, "Do I have to be challenged today too?" Like,
Yeah, yeah,
really, I think I've been challenged enough, thank you.
yeah.
But that's how we all grow. I would just try to keep it balanced, and your kids will keep you balanced, right?
Well, my wife. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Your kids. By the way, I always ask, like, tell us something we don't know about you. You have 3 very, very cute kids and
Mhm.
one that seems to stand out. Is
Oh, yeah, that's Luke. I'm sure. Well, I can't just acknowledge him because I'll hear about it from the other
right.
two. But I have two bigs and a little. My sweetheart, 15-year-old daughter. I'm learning how to be a girl dad with a girl with a boyfriend. Hi Nick, I got my eye on you still. Cameron loves sports, loves fantasy football. We play together, but yeah, the standout just because of his hair is
His
probably
hair. Where did he get that hair?
we don't know. My mom has pretty blonde hair and had even blonder hair when she was younger, but other than that, it doesn't really make sense. Neither of us have that color hair. We always make milkman jokes with my wife, but no, he's just his own. He's his own guy. Luke. He's very confident. He walks with a lot of swagger and he's climbed multiple mountains with me. That's our thing that we do because I'm in the Snoqualmie River Valley, like near a bunch of big mountains, and eventually we want to really do these like kind of bigger, even alpine peaks. But yeah, Luke is a fearless kid, and he has very noticeable hair. So when we moved into our community, it was like, "Oh, you're Luke's dad," or it was like, "Oh, you're Luke's mom," because they can spot him from across, a room or a park. So everybody knew Luke way before they knew us.
No, he has long hair. For those of you who don't know Luke, he's on his Instagram, but he has very long hair. It's not that long. It's like shoulder length, but he's
Shoulder
little
length, yeah,
and he has huge blonde hair. And you
yeah,
can tell he has a lot of swagger to him. He just
yeah.
you can tell he's a character. I find him so I'm laughing at him. I don't even know who he is, but he seems very amusing. Yeah.
It's even more so in person. Trust me. Yeah, it's real. It's real. Yeah,
Okay. All right, we're gonna wrap it up now. But if anybody wanted to get a hold of you, what would be
yeah,
the way to do that? I know you have chrisdayplasticsurgery.com. And
yeah.
it's like Chris with a K, K-R-I-S.
Yep, KRISDAY plasticsurgery.com. All of our office contact information is there, including like emails, info at Chris Day Plastic Surgery or Pacific Sound Plastic Surgery. Our name of our practice is Pacific Sound Plastic Surgery, and that's where we can be found on Instagram too, as Pacific Sound Plastic Surgery.
Okay. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to get to know you better. I'll be watching your career. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. And then for those, if you would please subscribe to Beauty in the Biz so you don't miss out on any of our other episodes. And of course, I would love a review as well. And then if you've got any feedback or questions for me, please leave them for me on my website at catherinemaley.com. I also offer a growth review strategy session if you want to take a look at your practice from my perspective. I can see things that you can't. And then you can always DM me on Instagram at Catherine Maley MBA. And with that, I will say thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.
The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want, but you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.